Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive, where we take all those interesting articles that
Yeah,
you've been saving up and break them down into bite-sized pieces,
yeah,
knowledge nuggets you can actually use.
yeah.
Today we're going to be tackling something that's essential but often dreaded:
Hmm.
budgeting.
Yes.
The source material for our deep dive today is a great FinShots article called "FinShots Money Resolution Number 2: Budget Plus You equals BFF."
Ooh, I like that.
It was published on January 16th, 2022,
Okay.
and it's packed with practical advice on how to make budgeting your new best friend.
It's interesting how budgeting gets such a bad rap. Like, people think it's all about restriction and deprivation,
Hmm,
but really it's about understanding your relationship with money. It's about making choices that align with what you truly value.
that's such a great point. So let's jump right into the why.
Okay.
Why is budgeting so important? The article compares it to knowing the ingredients
Yeah.
in your favorite meal. You can't expect to feel your best if you don't know what you're putting into your body. But how does that translate to our finances?
Well, think about it this way. If you don't know where your money is going, how can you possibly make informed decisions about how to use it? A budget gives you a clear picture of your spending habits. It helps you identify areas where you might be overspending and ultimately empowers you to make choices that support your financial goals.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about pinching pennies,
Hmm.
but about having a clear roadmap for your money. But let's be honest, the thought of actually creating a budget can feel really overwhelming.
Right.
Where do we even begin?
Well, the article outlines a really straightforward step-by-step process that takes the guesswork out of budgeting. The first step, and this is crucial,
Okay.
is gathering all your financial data. We're talking bank statements,
Yeah,
credit card bills, even those little cash transactions that tend to slip our minds.
yeah, I'm definitely guilty of those
Yeah.
cash amnesia moments, I swear. Sometimes my money disappears into thin air.
It happens to the best of us. But tracking those cash purchases is essential for getting a complete picture of your spending. And don't worry, there are tons of apps and tools that can help you do this easily. You could even go old school and keep a little notebook in your pocket.
Okay, so we've rounded up all of our financial statements and receipts. Now what?
Next, we start categorizing our expenses.
Okay.
Think big picture categories like housing, transportation, groceries, entertainment, and so on.
So we're basically creating a snapshot of
Yeah.
where our money went last month.
Exactly. It's like piecing together a financial puzzle. But here's where it gets really interesting and where most people stop.
Oh.
The article encourages us to go a step further
Right.
and break down those broad categories into smaller subcategories.
Now that you mention it, just looking at a big chunk labeled food
Yeah,
doesn't tell me very much.
right.
So how would we break that down further?
Let's say you spend a lot on food. Instead of just lumping it all together, you could separate your grocery bills from your restaurant expenses. And then within those subcategories, you can get even more specific. How much are you spending on dining out versus ordering takeout? Are you splurging on those premium grocery items, or are you sticking to your shopping list?
Wow, I hadn't thought about it that way. I can already see how this level of analysis could reveal some surprising spending patterns. The article mentions the author being shocked by how much
Yeah.
they were spending on premium groceries.
Hmm.
Do you think most people underestimate certain spending categories?
Absolutely. It's easy to overlook those small, seemingly insignificant purchases, but they can add up quickly. A daily latte, a subscription box you rarely use, those impulse buys at the checkout counter.
Yeah.
They all contribute to what I call invisible spending.
So this step is all about getting brutally honest with ourselves about where our money is actually going.
Exactly. No more hiding from those embarrassing spending habits.
I love it. And remember, this isn't about judgment or deprivation.
Right.
It's about awareness and making conscious choices. It's about understanding your spending habits so you can make adjustments that align with your values and goals.
I love that. It's about taking control rather than feeling controlled by our money.
So we've gathered our data, we've categorized everything, down to the last coffee. What's next?
Before we establish our spending guidelines,
Okay.
we need to factor in those expenses that don't occur every month. Think insurance premiums, car maintenance, holiday gifts,
Oh.
maybe even annual subscriptions you might forget about.
Ah, yes. The dreaded annual expenses. They always seem to sneak up on me.
They do. Any tips for how to handle those? The article suggests analyzing past spending patterns to get an idea of how much you typically spend on these irregular expenses.
Okay.
You can then incorporate them into your monthly budget so you're not caught off guard when those bills arrive.
That's a great tip. It's all about planning ahead and being prepared. So we've covered the recurring monthly expenses and the occasional ones. Is there anything else we need to consider before we move on to actually setting our budget?
There's one more category of expenses that can be tricky to budget for.
Oh,
Those unexpected costs that pop up from time to time.
you mean those surprise visits from friends and family, or when your car decides it needs a new transmission?
Exactly. Life is full of surprises. And not all of them are pleasant, especially when they impact our wallets. But the good news is we can prepare for these unexpected expenses too.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do we budget for the unpredictable?
Again, looking back at your past spending can provide valuable insights. Think about those unexpected expenses you've encountered in the past year. How much did you spend on them? How often did they occur? This can give you a rough estimate of how much you should set aside each month for a just-in-case fund.
So we're basically creating a financial safety net
Whoa!
for those inevitable life curveballs.
Exactly.
I like it.
And having that safety net can make a huge difference in how you handle those unexpected expenses. Instead of feeling stressed and overwhelmed, you can approach them with a sense of calm and control.
This is all incredibly helpful. I'm starting to feel a lot less intimidated by this whole budgeting process.
That's great to hear. Remember, budgeting isn't about creating a rigid set of rules. That suck the joy out of life.
Right.
It's about giving yourself the power to make informed choices about your money, so you can live a life that feels both fulfilling and financially secure.
I love that. Okay, so we've gathered our financial data, we've categorized our expenses, and we've even accounted for those unpredictable costs. Now comes the part that I've been both anticipating and dreading. Setting those actual spending guidelines. Where do we even start?
This is where we get to tailor the budget to you.
Yeah.
The article mentions the popular 50.30.20 rule, which is a great starting point, especially if you're new to budgeting.
I've heard of that one. Can you refresh my memory on how that breaks down?
Sure. It's pretty simple. 50% of your income goes toward your needs, 30% toward your wants, and the remaining 20% goes to savings and debt repayment.
Okay, so it's all about allocating your income into those three main buckets.
Yeah.
But what exactly falls under needs versus wants? That seems like a bit of a gray area.
You're right. It can be subjective. But think of needs as your essential expenses. Things like housing, groceries, utilities, transportation, and healthcare. Basically the things you absolutely need to survive and function in society.
So those recurring expenses we talked about earlier, rent bills and groceries, those all fall under the needs category.
Exactly. Wants, on the other hand, are the things that bring you joy and enhance your life, but aren't strictly necessary for survival.
Okay.
Think dining out, entertainment, travel, hobbies. That new gadget you've had your eye on, those are your wants.
So the wants are where we get to inject a bit of personality into our budget.
Absolutely. And that's important. Budgeting shouldn't feel like punishment. It's about finding a balance between enjoying life today and planning for a secure future. And that's where the 20% for savings and debt repayment comes in.
Right. That 20% is all about building a solid financial foundation.
Mm.
But let's be real, sticking to these percentages can feel pretty restrictive, especially if you're living in an expensive city or dealing with high debt. Is this 50.33.20 rule set in stone, or can it be adjusted?
It's definitely not one size fits all. The beauty of budgeting is that it's completely customizable. If you're struggling to fit your essential expenses into that 50% for leads, you might need to adjust those percentages. Maybe it's 60.20.20 way, or even 70.20 for a while.
So it's all about finding what works for your individual situation.
Exactly. The key is to be realistic and honest with yourself about your spending habits. If the 50.30.20 rule feels too restrictive, don't force it. Adjust those percentages until you find a balance that allows you to cover your essential needs while still having some room for enjoyment and saving for the future.
That's really reassuring. It takes the pressure off feeling like you have to fit into some perfect budgeting mold. Speaking of different approaches, the article also mentions an alternative budgeting method called the net worth method. Sounds intriguing. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. This method is less about tracking every single expense and more about focusing on the big picture of your financial health. It's about tracking your net worth over time, which is essentially the difference between your assets and liabilities.
Okay, so instead of getting bogged down in the details of every coffee and cab ride, I'm looking at the overall value of what I own versus what I owe.
Exactly. With the net worth method, you're focusing on growing your assets, like your savings, investments, and property value, while simultaneously reducing your liabilities, such as loans and credit card debt.
I can see how that could be appealing for people who aren't into the nitty-gritty of traditional budgeting. It seems more focused on the long game, on building wealth over time.
It is. And it can be particularly effective for those who have irregular income or whose expenses fluctuate a lot from month to month. It allows for more flexibility and doesn't require you to stick to a strict budget every single month.
So if I'm a freelancer with unpredictable income or someone who hates tracking every penny, this net worth method might be a better fit for me.
It could be. Of course, every method has its pros and cons. The key is to experiment and find what resonates with you and your financial goals.
It sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the importance of budgeting Gov into the steps of creating a budget, explored different methods like the 50-point, 30-point, 20 rule and the net worth method, and even tackled those tricky, unexpected expenses. I'm already feeling much more equipped to take charge of my own finances. But before we wrap up, the article poses an interesting question that I think is worth exploring. They ask, how often do we actually talk about how we can increase income instead?
That's such a crucial point, and one that often gets overshadowed by the focus on cutting expenses. While managing your spending is essential, there's a limit to how much you can cut back. Focusing on increasing your income opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
It's like shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Instead of feeling limited by our current financial situation, we start exploring ways to expand our earning potential. That's a really powerful shift in perspective.
It empowers you to take control of your financial future rather than feeling like you're constantly playing defense. It encourages you to invest in your skills, explore new opportunities, and think creatively about how to generate more income.
So it's not just about trimming the fat in our budget. It's about finding ways to grow the pie.
Exactly. By combining smart spending habits with strategies to increase your income, you create a powerful synergy that can accelerate your progress toward your financial goals.
This is all so insightful. It's not just about saving more. It's about making more. But how do we actually go about increasing our income? Is there a step-by-step guide for that too? It would be amazing if there was like a simple formula, for increasing income.
All right.
But I'm guessing it's a bit more complex than that.
There's no magic button, unfortunately. But the good news is there are tons of resources and strategies
Okay.
out there. The first step is identifying your skills and passions. What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing?
Okay, so it starts with self-reflection, figuring out what we bring to the table, so to speak. What happens once we have a better grasp of our strengths?
Then you can start exploring ways to leverage those skills to generate income. Maybe it's taking on freelance work, starting a side hustle, negotiating a raise at your current job, or even launching your own business.
There really are so many possibilities. It's exciting to think about all the different avenues we can explore, but I imagine it can also feel overwhelming. Where do you even begin to sort through all those options?
You're right, it can be a lot to take in. A good starting point is to identify one or two income-generating ideas that resonate with you.
Okay.
Then start researching. Talk to people in those fields. Read books and articles. Take online courses. Immerse yourself in the knowledge. And connect with others who are already doing what you aspire to do.
That makes sense. It's about taking those initial steps, even if they seem small,
Huh.
and gradually building momentum.
Exactly.
So we've covered the why of budgeting, the how-to, of creating a budget that works for us, and even explored ways to boost our income. That's a lot to digest. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up this deep dive?
Remember, personal finance is a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, successes and setbacks. The key is to stay focused on your goals, be patient with yourself, and celebrate every milestone along the way. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are tons of resources available, from financial advisors to online communities that can provide guidance and support.
That's such an important reminder. We don't have to navigate this financial maze alone. This has been such an insightful deep dive. I'm walking away feeling empowered and equipped to not only manage my money, but also explore new ways to grow it. And who knows, maybe budgeting and I will actually become BFFs.
I have a feeling you will. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive, where we take complex topics and break them down into manageable pieces of knowledge. Remember, taking control of your finances is within your reach, and every step you take brings you closer to a more secure and fulfilling future.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.